is true?
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Good morning, President.
Bonjour à vous, bienvenue.
Merci d'accorder cette interview à Al Jazeera.
Thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. France has been struck twice in 2 weeks, a double strike. First of all at Conflans-Sainte-Honorine, in a school, and then in Nice, in a church. The Muslim world is following you, and you, yourself, are closely following the Muslim world. What can you say to the Muslim world today?
Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez dire au monde musulman aujourd'hui?
Merci d'être là et vous avez raison de rappeler
Well,
que
first of all, thank you for coming. And you are right that our country has been struck 3 times by terrorist attacks carried out by extremists, violent extremists, who in distorting and deforming Islam have committed acts which have deeply shocked and wounded the people of France to the core.
avec des actes qui ont véritablement sidéré, blessé le peuple français.
The decapitation of a teacher because he was teaching freely. And then in Nice, this Thursday, in a church, the Basilica of Our Lady, the decapitation of 2 people and the stabbing of a 3rd. France is still reeling from the shock of these 2 terrorist attacks and is at one and the same time feeling sadness, unity and anger. And for the first time, when we experienced these events, there were very strong international relations amounting to attacks on France and a lot of misunderstandings, which is why I want to dispel them. Things I saw on your social networks and on your channel, so I thought this way I could dispel a lot of these misunderstandings. If you will allow me, though, my first words will be addressed to the French whose faith is essentially Catholic, because they've been very deeply wounded, and I would like to convey to them all the support and protection of the Republic. Just a few minutes ago, I was in touch with the Pope in order to convey that to him too. Then, in a broader sense, I would like to say that France is a country that is committed to freedom of worship and what is often called secularism, a complex term which has given rise to many misunderstandings which I hope that I can attempt to dispel today. There is, it should be recalled, freedom to believe or not to believe, which makes of France a country in which we would like each and every one to be a citizen irrespective of his or her religion. One where everyone, irrespective of their religion, has the same political and civic rights, and a society in which people of all faiths can live and where these faiths can be practiced. This is very important. Transcendence has a place in our societies, but the state must guarantee that right to everyone. I want to say that, contrary to what I've heard a great deal during the last couple of days, our country is one which has no problem with any religion in the world because they can all be practiced here freely. And as far as French Muslims are concerned, and indeed all Muslim citizens throughout the world, I want to say to them that France is a country where this religion is practiced freely and where there is no stigmatization. Everything that I've heard is quite wrong. France is a country whose universal vocation is to be committed to people being able to live together irrespective of their religion. Many untrue things have been said, and what I want to do here is to send out a message of resolve against all the violent extremists and at the same time convey a message of peace, unity and setting the record straight. So there you have it. That is my main objective for this conversation with you today.
Sachant que les musulmans sont les premiers à souffrir.
Bearing in mind that the Muslims are the first to suffer violence, they always pay the price, with regard to the cartoons, which have been published in France on more than one occasion, caricatures that depict the prophets of Islam and Muslims. On each occasion, Muslims have been wounded, shocked, and at times misunderstood.
Choqués et des fois mal compris.
To what extent can the feelings of Muslims be taken into consideration?
Alors, vous revenez et on commence
Well,
par un
you are coming back to that again, and this immediately brings us to one of the misunderstandings that have surfaced in recent weeks, a misunderstanding or origin of much manipulation that is, if you will allow me, sometimes very serious. The issue of the caricatures is not a new subject. Let me remind you that for more than 15 years now there have been terrible polemics, with Denmark as well, and with the support of France at the time, and today it's with France itself. Our country has its own history, and this history consists of having built a public identity through in some senses withdrawing it from religion. This is what is often termed secularism, because first and foremost France has experienced a history with the Catholic religion, and we've elaborated our laws, which are the fruit of the spirit of the Enlightenment. Our laws are the emanation of the French people, a sovereign people, and our laws enshrine the rights and freedoms of each and every one. The freedom of worship, which I've referred to, a freedom that we defend and which is practiced in our country, but also the freedom of conscience and free speech. This means that in our country, France, any journalist may freely express himself about the President of the Republic, the government, the political majority or minority, or the rest of the world. And that idea of free speech also contains the freedom, the possibility of drawing caricatures. That is our right, and it comes from way back, from the end of the 19th century. It is important to defend it because it belongs to the French people, and we are in our own sovereign country. This right has led to there being newspaper caricatures, which we have a history of, and these cartoons have mocked political leaders, your humble servant being the first in line, which is perfectly normal, as well as religion, all religions. So when we talk about caricatures, I want you to know that many newspapers, including Charlie Hebdo, because there's been a lot of talk about that one, have mainly caricatured the Christian God, the Jewish religion, rabbis, etc. And today, and for some years now, we've seen cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad or of the Muslim religion. I understand the feelings that this gives rise to. I respect them. But I need you to understand what my role is. My role is to calm things down, which is what I'm doing here. But it is also to protect these rights. And there is an important difference here which all Muslims who might have been shocked have to understand. The issue is not about whether France and its representative in the figure of the president draws these cartoons or supports them as such. That is not the issue, because the press is free. There are not official newspapers. The French government did not draw these caricatures. The issue is about knowing whether the president agrees to prohibit these rights. The answer is no, because it is a right of the French people and it affects everybody. So what is important for me is to protect that freedom. I also want everything to be done with each and every person being respected. This freedom is very important. So much of what has been said during these last weeks about caricatures, we can condemn them, and that is right, as well as many other things that are done, and also in other countries which are committed to free speech. I find it perfectly normal that people react and say that they don't agree, but there are two different things here that I cannot accept. The first is the confusion which has been maintained by much of the media and sometimes also by political and religious leaders, which consists in saying that these caricatures are in some sense the project or the emanation of the French government or the President of the Republic. No, I'm here to preserve this right and I shall always do so, and there are people who exercise it. That's how it is. And the second thing that I cannot condone is people's justification, either directly or indirectly, of any form of violence. I'm not a specialist in theology, but it is not my understanding that Islam legitimizes or supports resorting to violence of any kind. So while I understand and respect the fact that people might be shocked by these caricatures, I will never accept that physical violence is justified because of them. And I shall always defend freedom of speech in my country, the freedom to write, to think and to draw. This does not mean, however, that I personally support everything which is said, thought or drawn. It simply means that these freedoms, these human rights which have been created in France, I believe that it is our duty to protect them, and thus to protect the sovereignty of the people of France.
Monsieur le Président, moi je vous transmets des...
President, I am conveying two questions which are occasionally asked in the Arab and Muslim world, and which are based on statements made by yourself. In the speech you made in homage to the teacher Mr. Samuel Paty, who was assassinated, you said, and I quote, "We will not give up the right to make caricatures or drawings, even if others may back down. The resolve is clearly based on freedom of speech, but it was off the cuff, and it's seen by some people as being defiant, rather than taking the feelings of Muslims into consideration. How do we assess this?"
Well, I've just explained it. First of all, there have been a number of misunderstandings about the sentence you have just quoted, and thank you for having quoted it literally. The translations which have been made by a lot of the media in the Arab world and which I have seen on social networks contain a lie. A lie. I was understood to have said that I support the humiliating caricatures made of the Prophet. I never said any such thing. Firstly, because these same caricatures, and this is important for all Muslims who are listening to us, are about all religions, all of them. There are no caricatures that are specifically against one religion rather than another one. And in addition to this, all leaders are implied. The second thing I said is that I was protecting their right because that is my role. And I also believe that in our society we must accept and accomplish respect for one another. But as President of the Republic, it is not up to me to water down that right because some people might be shocked. That is what I want you to understand. Because if I were to do so, I would be setting up a sort of moral or religious order in my own country. If I were to say to the people that writing or drawing, that they don't have the right to say things like that because it shocks other people, then little by little freedom of speech would be reduced because it would become a space in which we would not actually speak about one another. Herein lies the whole difficulty of this project, which is collectively ours, and I believe that it derives from the project of the Enlightenment and the values which we hold dear. It is not just a question of coexisting side by side, it is also a question of accepting that we can pass comment on one another calmly and with the kind of respect that I believe in, and occasionally be able to mock one another, irrespective of what our religion or philosophy might be, and to accept that it be done within a framework that implies both respect and peace. In terms of the sentence you quoted, I think that the reaction of the Muslim world was first and foremost due to numerous lies, to the distortions I referred to, and to the fact that people were led to believe that I am in favour of these caricatures. To these people I say that this is not the issue. I'm in favour of people being able to write, think and draw freely in my country because I think that it is important and that that is their right and freedom. I understand that it can hurt and I respect that, but we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it, we have to build a space of respect and mutual comprehension. So I believe that the solution lies not in prohibiting this right, and even less so in trying to justify violence of any sort as a result of being shocked.
Pour les caricatures, bien sûr, ce sujet qui reste toujours.
For some, this is obviously something that is in all the headlines. Muslims oppose any kind of caricatures, be they of Moses, Jesus, the Virgin Mary, but they point out that it's all too easy to publish or republish the drawings and cartoons of Muhammad, of Islam, or of the Prophet. A repetition which implies that it is easier to caricature the Prophet of Islam than to caricature the others.
Non, je vous l'ai dit, d'abord c'est faux.
First of all, in factual terms that is incorrect, and it is historically incorrect too. The Catholics in France have sometimes been very shocked by what they've seen. And I know that Jews have been too, and so this is something that we have to discuss. You know, when it affects you personally, I'm not talking about caricatures of religion, but people can, you might not like it, but disliking something or being shocked by it does not justify violence. I do not accept the idea that there is a kind of stigmatization. No, that is not right. I would also like to stress the fact that free speech is something much broader than mere cartoons, but they're part of it. So there. I think that it would be a mistake to fall into a kind of chain reaction of provocation. I wanted to set the record straight for you. First of all, there is history. These drawings were done in France, and France is not under Islamic law. France is under the law of the sovereign French people. It is the law they decide on. And more specifically, these laws come down to us from the 19th century. Who am I to say that because a particular religion has an issue with such and such a representation or word, I should ban it? I cannot do that. And I do not think that it is my duty to do so. So what I want, and this is my message, is that together I want to remove the falsehoods and the ambiguities, and I want to say to all the Muslims of the world that in your countries there are things that certain religions do not necessarily like, perhaps including some French nationals. But do they attack you because they don't like it, because they are shocked? No. We have to learn how to get to know one another and understand where our laws and customs come from. But there is nothing in these caricatures, in this freedom of speech, which is done against a particular religion, whichever it is, and specifically not against Islam. That is very important for our country. Whereas in many countries throughout the world, and this is something that I note with sadness, freedom of speech has declined over the decades. Why? because there have been arguments, fear, and the chaos created by reaction. So what we see is a kind of shrinking of this freedom to draw, to discuss, sometimes to provoke, and I believe that this is grievous for the freedom of everyone. So you must believe that I, your humble servant, for as long as I am President of the French Republic, will respect all the citizens of France as well as all the citizens of the world, irrespective of what their religion is. I'm committed to that respect. But I want you to understand what the exercise of this freedom is in France and in other countries. Another mark of my respect is to treat Muslims like people of all other religions. I'm trying to establish the kind of respect that can accept humour and differences. While it is true that at times some things can shock people, that does not mean that one should prohibit or reduce them. We should be able to talk about them.
Often when people talk about Islam in France, Muslims cite anti-Semitism. They say, why are there laws which penalize anti-Semitism? Why are there debates which close off certain historical facts, revisionisms, for example, which are ring-fenced by French law?
Yes, I can confirm that.
Is it not possible to have a law that would protect their holy symbols?
You're confusing two things here. History, the mutual respect of different peoples, and religion. France is fighting anti-Semitism and racism in all their forms. And anti-Semitism as such is an attack and hatred against a people, in fact against all peoples. Anti-Semitism and racism in France are fought against and prohibited by law. But it's not just a case of anti-Semitism. That would be wrong. It is forms of racism. But in the same way, as we are saying just now, in France one has the right to do caricatures and to criticise the Jewish religion, like all religions. So there is no double standard or double statute. It would be wrong to say that. Wrong. There is indeed a law in France which penalises historical revisionism, because many people build their anti-Semitism on a denial of the Shoah. That is a fact. But in France we do not question historical fact. We do not go searching in other countries for a denial of such and such a genocide or teach a... Not in France. We recognise things as they are, including, moreover, the crimes we ourselves have committed. Let me remind you that 25 years ago, Jacques Chirac acknowledged the responsibility of the French state during World War II, and we've even acknowledged what was done in the name of slavery and colonialisation. So France looks at its true history in the face. But we understand that others look at it too, and we try to avoid hatred being fed through a revised and falsely corrected history. You have to remember that it is not the government that writes history, that is the job of historians. All forms of racism and anti-Semitism are fought against in France by law, which of course does not mean that they do not exist. They do. And they are a terrible scourge, and we struggle with them. I have asked the government to do even more. Right from the beginning of my term of office, as indeed was the case with my predecessors, whatever their political persuasion, I have fought against it. Mainly because a lot of violent acts have been committed against the Jews in France during recent years. But there have also been acts carried out in the name of racism, which are unacceptable. We fight against all of them, all of these acts in the same way. There is, as I said, the possibility of criticising religions, and people carry out acts against certain religions. With regard to this, and I hope that I'm making myself crystal clear here, I want us to be intractable. However, these days in France there are people who commit acts against Muslims because they are Muslims, against Catholics because they are Catholics, against Protestants because they are Protestants, against Jews because they are Jews, and so on. So I instructed the Minister of the Interior to entrust a parliamentarian with responsibility of identifying, following through and building transparency with regard to all acts committed on religious grounds against our fellow citizens on French territory.
In the wake of the criticism that France has undergone over the last weeks, there ensued a boycott campaign. What is your reaction to that?
Elle est indigne et je la condamne.
It is outrageous and I condemn it. It is being done by certain private groups because they haven't understood, because they relied on falsehoods and caricatures, sometimes from other leaders. It is unacceptable. You have to understand what is happening on the issue of the cartoons. Because in France, which is a sovereign country, I decide that the right, the law endorsed by the sovereign people should be applied, and that I should then try to calm things down. But I say that I'm not going to renege on this right. because that would be unconstitutional and it would represent a terrible loss of sovereignty for us, because people confuse my position, which I consider to be unassailable. They start attacking a state. As I said to many other leaders, in France the press is free. In many of the countries calling for a boycott, there is no longer any free press, which means that there is no longer any possibility of drawing caricatures, not only of the Prophet Muhammad, or God, or Moses, or Jesus, or anyone, but even of the leaders of their own countries. Cartoons of foreign leaders are sometimes drawn, but not the ones of the leaders of the country they live in, because they have crushed the hands of the cartoonists, because sometimes they have killed the journalists, or because they've put them behind bars. This is not the case in France. And so when a newspaper in France says something, it is not the position of the government to decide on a boycott of a country, of a people, because something has been written in a newspaper in our country is insane. Or it is just a case of transposing what happens in certain other countries, but not here or in the free world. Because the words of a journalist are not the mouthpiece of propaganda, we don't have any more of that in France, I'm pleased to say.
Do you fear that there will be repercussions on French people abroad, on French companies abroad?
Et je pense que tous les dirigeants
I think that all political and religious leaders who do not categorically and roundly condemn any form of violence against France, which is a country of freedom and enlightenment, should bear a certain responsibility, direct or sometimes indirect, with regard to violence committed against French people in France or abroad. That is why the message of appeasement that I wanted to convey today is also a message calling for responsibility. During these last days, I've seen too many people saying unacceptable things about France, corroborating all the lies which have been said about us or what I am supposed to have said, being the tacit accomplices of the worst. You know, I want you to understand what we're trying to do in France. For some years now, we've been fiercely combating terrorism. It has cost the lives of more than 300 of our fellow citizens and sometimes of foreigners living here. This terrorism carried out in the name of Islam is a scourge for the Muslims of the entire world. You were saying the same thing yourself just now. You know, when you look at the authoritative figures on the subject as of today, if you take the last 40 years, more than 80% of the victims of this terrorism are Muslims. When young girls are abducted in Nigeria by groups in the name of Islam, they and their families are the victims. When a maternity hospital is bombed, when... I could quote you dozens of examples where terrorism in the name of Islam claims mainly the lives of Muslims. We are fighting this terrorism because it strikes us here on our own soil. And then there is a second category that I've decided to combat. There have been many misunderstandings about this because there have been problems of translation. It's what we call in France radical Islamism. What does this mean? These are violent extremists who distort religion and who commit violence in the name of Islam. And this fight that I've been waging has been translated as my fight against Islam. No, on the contrary, France is a country where the religion of several million of our fellow citizens is Islam. I'm not going to fight them. They are fully fledged citizens and they want to live in peace. And we have friendly countries everywhere whose main religion is Islam. But today, in the name of Islam and thus distorting it, violent extremists are carrying out the worst acts. And they are not terrorists. What are they up to then? They take children out of school, they indoctrinate them, and they justify violence. They are active on our territory in France and linked with groups abroad. And so what we've been very forcibly grappling with for the last 3 years is trying to reduce their grip, to protect our people and by the same token protect the Muslim French, because they stealthily feed into a feeling which is harmful to them, friendship between religions. And this is down to misunderstanding. And so what I reaffirmed during the Demuro speech I gave at the beginning of October was my determination through a bill of law which is in the pipeline, which was dubbed separatist, but I removed the ambiguity there. It is a bill of law to combat the violent extremist groups and individuals who are active in France in the name of Islam. It is designed to protect all French people and more broadly and indeed specifically those of the Muslim faith. So what do we intend to do? Prevent them from taking children out of school, the children of the Republic. We also intend to put a stop to the financing linked to terrorists which enables them to pursue their activities. So financial transparency and above all, something which for me is essential in France, ensuring that everyone, irrespective of their faith or religion, fully observes the legislation of the French Republic. That is essential. So that is what we're doing. But I want to clearly distinguish between these extremists who act in the worst ways or who justify the worst actions in their very sophisticated and dangerous speeches from Muslims. Because everywhere, throughout the Muslim world, people have tried to merge these two groups. By deforming my words, lying, maintaining that the President of France and therefore France has a problem with Islam. No, we have no problem with Islam. None. Moreover, our history, both intellectually and culturally, is intimately linked to Islam. We were one of the first countries to translate the Quran, which has been taught at the Sorbonne in France since the 17th century, since when it has been the subject of controversy. We are one of the first countries to have opened a magnificent mosque, the Great Mosque of Paris, in the heart of our capital, and we have also challenged our religious representatives. The president of the Islamic faith in France, the rector of the Great Mosque, will tell you what I've just told you. So the fight we are engaged in is one which is essential for our generations. It's a struggle against terrorism, against violent extremism, and against all speech which justifies violence in the name of Islam. Our fight is in order to protect our fellow citizens, and indeed those citizens of all other countries in the world, whatever their religion, including Muslims.
L'islam, ce mot-là, vous l'avez...
Islam, that word that you uttered in your speech at Les Mureaux, and particularly in that sentence which has been spread about and published several times. Let me quote it. Islam is a religion that is currently going through a profound crisis throughout the entire world. Although that sentence was taken from a speech that went on for 70 minutes, people have focused on that one sentence, and many people have felt angry about it. What did you mean, President, by that sentence and by that diagnosis?
Ce que je viens d'évoquer,
What I said just now, and you are quite right when you say that it was taken out of context from a 70-minute speech. What I wanted to state clearly is that in today's world, there are individuals who, in the name of this religion, deform it, and, claiming that they are defending it, kill, assassinate, and slit throats, and whose discourse aims at justifying a kind of withdrawal of human groups from the rest of the world. There is a violence in the world today which is propagated by individuals, groups of extremists, in the name of Islam. And this is a problem for Islam, inasmuch as Muslims are the first victims. I've already mentioned the figures, more than 80%, and a problem for all of us. So all religions have been through this type of crisis.
So the crisis is not so much in the heart of Islam as in Muslim society, to be more accurate.
la crise, elle est au sein de nos sociétés.
The crisis is within our societies because everywhere we have individuals who, in the name of a religion, and most of the time not knowing much about it, although often in collusion with people who know more about it, commit the worst atrocities, terrorist attacks, acts of great violence, and engage in political projects which are completely contrary to our values and our ability to live together. Extremism merging with terrorism. These individuals are a danger for our societies. This danger is something we live with. Look at Tunisia, which experienced on its own soil the terrorist attacks perpetrated by the same terrorists at Lobardo. For decades now, Algeria has been experiencing terrible attacks by terrorists in the name of this religion. Afghanistan has been through it, and now it's the turn of the Sahel and sub-Saharan Africa, and our societies are living through it too. We can't carry on as if nothing is happening. These people are not acting like this in the name of some other cause. So it is because of this that the present moment is so important, and that is why I wanted to address the issue, because I think it is absolutely essential for all of us that all the Muslims in the world are clear about the situation, and that they come to the assistance of all those who want to fight against violence. Nothing justifies it. They must all come together behind the initiatives that we must take to combat not only the terrorists, but also those who expound ideologies that justify terrorism. For me, this is one of the key elements of the battle that we are waging against building up an ideology throughout the world which, by deforming a religion, becomes an ideology of death. This is the extremism of Islam. This is what Al-Qaeda does. This is what Daesh does. This is what the ISIS groups in the Sahara are doing, and there are several others. All of these terrorist groups also have behind them people who claim to be preachers, intellectuals, organizers within our societies, whose discourse is barely acceptable and who justify the recourse to violence. So we all need to have our red lines, and in particular to condemn loud and clear all violence, all red lines that are overstepped. So when I see leaders, be they political or religious, who justify decapitations or terrorism when they consider that they are humiliated or wounded, those people have to choose their camp. When it comes to the moment of truth, those people do not defend the Muslims of the world, they defend terrorists and they justify their acts. We must all be clear about this. I say this because it is a question of sending a true message out to all the Muslims of the world, a message of protection, because they are the first people to be threatened by this horror. So that is what I meant in that sentence. There is today an ideology with men and women who are constructing a logic of death and who, by distorting and deforming a religion, justify crime and justify the will to no longer live together.
Et justifie la volonté de ne plus vivre ensemble.
Les musulmans en France ont besoin.
So the Muslims of France, the Muslim community, needs to be calmed and reassured.
Bien sûr, parce que tout ça
Of course, because all of this ultimately has an impact. French Muslims look at your media sometimes and they see your channel, your social networks, because sometimes you get the feeling that we are not living in the same world, or at least because the projector focuses on one thing only. The French state does not recognize any one religion. French society welcomes them all. All the men and women of France must be able to live their religions untroubled. And all the French, whatever their origins, whatever other nationalities they might share, absolutely have to observe all the laws of the Republic. That's how it works. But my message is one of calm and of peace, because this is the one message with which the French people entrusted me when I was voted in. I also believe that it is the historic mission of our country, and a very profound one of peace between religions, because it is based on knowledge and reason. So my role is not to inquire into your beliefs. My job is to ensure that you all abide by the laws of the Republic. I will never accept that you do not observe the law of the country because of your religion if you live in France. I want you to be able to believe in your God, whoever he is, in an untroubled way, serenely, in our country. So when sometimes crimes are committed against Muslims in France, I want you to know that we will be intractable. They happen. Incidents do happen. Too often, unfortunately, they happen too often to our fellow citizens, irrespective of their religion.
Monsieur le Président, vous avez parlé de séparatisme, ce terme qui est devenu...
President, you have spoken about separatism. It is a term which in a short space of time has become very widespread. It is on everyone's lips. One has the impression that this term stigmatizes the Muslims in France. And in your speech at Les Mureaux, you said that we had created our own separatism ourselves. So does the state have some responsibility?
Oui, j'ai dit qu'il y avait en tout cas une...
Yes, indeed, or at least our policy is to combat these violent extremists who act in the name of Islam. But the state should also re-engage a policy with regard to many of the children who live in our country and who feel abandoned. I'm quite clear about the situation. When I spoke of separatism, what does that mean and how does it correspond to what I was describing just now? It is because you have groups that I call violent extremists acting in the name of Islam and deforming the religion, who teach and explain things while at the same time taking advantage of all the freedoms and rights that our republic and our country offer. They teach that people should not respect France or our rights and that they should, as it were, step beyond our laws. They teach that women are not the equals of men, that little girls should not have the same rights as little boys. Not in France. I'm telling you this very clearly. Not in France. No, we believe in enlightenment, and women citizens have the same right as male citizens do. It is existential. And so never, never, never will I accept an association, even if it were acting in the name of a religion which espouses those laws, or one which says that a little girl is not the same as a little boy, that she won't have the same education and won't be given the same opportunities because that is not their law. People who believe that should go elsewhere. Not on French soil. So I say that those who in our country want to establish their law and separate off a part of society, we must clearly fight against that. Because they will have to decide to separate. This is not against Muslims. It is against the violent extremists who do not want to remain within our law. Because this is the key to protecting the French and especially French Muslims. Because I do not want a little girl whose parents believe in Islam, which they are perfectly entitled to do, to be taken up by one of these associations and to be ill-treated by them in our country. That I cannot accept. So when I speak of separatism, my concern is not about the religion in question, but about the use of certain practices in the name of any religion. Moreover, other practices have also been mentioned that exist in France and which are the fruit of other religions or other groups. But then I say that we too have a certain responsibility. Because if you look at the strategy of these extremists, and sometimes of terrorists, they construct their entire discourse or narrative around resentment. In other words, they explain to the Muslim world that they have been badly treated by the West. You have been humiliated, colonized, they say, and you're not treated well in their societies. First of all, look at our history. I have already mentioned colonization and the history of France on various continents. We look at it full in the face, and I know what that history is. But I do not accept it. We have to follow it through to the end, this reconciliation, through history to the truth. I am struck when I see that this discourse of extremist groups prospers amongst young people who've never known colonization, people who've been living in France for generations. Why does it work nevertheless? Because there is resentment, but it is economic. So I think that in France we have not done enough for all the children who arrive here for them to succeed with equal opportunities. But here I wouldn't want to confuse two things. It has nothing to do with religion, very little. It often has to do with the first name, the surname, the colour of one's skin, the place where one lives.
So the model of integration in France requires improving?
Oui.
Yes, it requires a greater collective engagement, because we have today what I would call corporatisms, which block society. They affect everyone. They affect young people who might not live in problematic districts, but who come from modest backgrounds. But they affect even more young people who come from modest backgrounds, whose parents are often immigrants, and whose skin colour is different. This is fact, and I look at it full on. So we need to do a lot more in terms of our housing policy. We have already begun this during these last 3 years, but I want to see it accelerate. A housing policy which would mean that access throughout the country would be more balanced. And then there's training. We have to do much more for employment, and the key factor in these districts in order to avoid the violent extremist groups who succeed is that we must succeed in retrieving the French Republican dream that these young people should be able to find opportunities, economic ones, that they can become champions in startups, in cinema, in the academic field, in ecological transition. But the fact of the matter is that today they find themselves even more blocked than other sectors of society. That is true.
You get the feeling that French secularism is in general hypersensitive to religious affairs.
I also get the feeling that some religions are hypersensitive to secularism.
For sure.
I have yet to see anyone condemned to death in the name of French secularism. It would be good if everyone was so clear about it. The red lines, for me, anyone who steps over them in order to condemn someone to death or who justifies a violent action is on the other side. If we're clear about that, we will already have made enormous progress during the course of this broadcast.
Apart from condemnations and violence, French secularism is nonetheless sensitive about religious matters and especially about Islam, such as the kerchief. People have been talking about the kerchief for more than 30 years. This kind of debate does not exist in the UK, for example. From afar, we see this sensitivity. Why in France?
Alors, je vais vous dire d'abord pourquoi il y en a une, ce que c'est que la laïcité et pourquoi il y a des différences avec d'autres sociétés.
Well, first of all, I will tell you why it exists, what secularism is and why there are these differences between societies. I'm not saying that it's better in France. I shall simply try to explain why it is as it is. Secularism is the possibility of at one and the same time believing or not believing without it having any consequences on your citizenship. So it's a law of freedom. It means that in France you have the freedom to believe or not believe, irrespective of your religion. And here I would invite you to examine this question critically. Many countries teach us how they treat their citizens when they are of such and such a religion. Do these people have the same rights? Often this is not the case. Then it's a principle of separation between the church and the state. The state is neutral and has nothing to do with religions. It neither funds nor regulates them. And those, the civil servants, who serve the state, are sworn to the principle of neutrality and must not wear any sign of their religion. And our schools, because we are training pupils who are not yet adults, they must provide a neutral space, which is why there are no religious symbols in our schools, until the age of 18. At university there can be. But having said that, secularism does not imply facing religion. That would not be right. In society, all religions are alive, and you see the kerchief being worn in the streets, just as you see people wearing a cross or a kippah in the streets. Sometimes confusion over this arises, but not in France. There are, however, neutral spaces where the state is present. So let me state very clearly that in France, the principle of secularism has no problem with regard to Islam as a religion. None. It has to be said, however, that at the time when sects were organized in France, Islam was not very present. Muslim civilization shares a history with our country. It has contributed a great deal to this country for centuries. Our scholars were interested in it, and we have a very strong relationship with enlightened Islam. But there were very few Muslim citizens in 1905. With migration in the 1960s and 70s, and during the last decades, Islam has grown in our country, as I have said. The figures are never accurate because we don't calculate religious statistics. But when I look at the analyses done by various institutions, I see that 6 million French people are of the Muslim faith. So we have no problem with this religion of which several millions of our fellow citizens are believers. Having said that, why is it that things are not the same here as they are in Great Britain? Because we are not a multicultural country or society. It's true that the Anglo-Saxons and several other countries in Europe developed very differently from us from a religious point of view. Let me remind you that Britain is still a constitutional monarchy where the monarch has a relationship with religion, one which was also forged through suffering, the vicissitudes of the 17th century. So the relationship with religion in Britain is not the same as ours. Their religious policies are not the same. They have a different history. As to whether or not the fact that the Anglo-Saxons have a multicultural society in which various religions cohabit makes theirs a better model than ours, I wouldn't like to be the judge of that. But it's different, you are right. I would like to say a couple of words about the beauty of the French model, in which I have a very deep belief. I do not believe in fighting for one or another religion. I would like to see all the children who arrive in our country living happily and in harmony. I think that in the French ambition there is something unique. And that is the idea that essentially we can have the same view of the world because we are citizens of the same country, men and women citizens of the same country. It is the idea that you can practice your religion, believe or not believe, but that we have to talk to one another, respect one another, so that we share the same image of the world. It means that we must know how to live together in the full sense of that word. We must be able to understand one another, accept the ways in which we are different, and construct a shared vision of what we are and of the rest of the world. So we all have to make the effort to recognize other people's religions, to embrace them so that we can live in peace. We must have a permanent dialogue so as to build the totality of the laws which are ours. It is not through religion that you can withdraw from citizenship, and you can never fight a religion in the name of citizenship. That is the message that France bears. And it is one which is widespread in the Middle East and on the African continent. I believe that we must not lose sight of this message. Because when I look at the folly of the world in which we live and its brutality, it too is linked with the fact that people in the same country do not want to construct their laws together, and they no longer share the same vision of the world, even if it's effected through imperfect mediation. They want their religion and their vision of the world to prevail over that of others. It's for this reason that I say with much humility and friendship in the true sense of the word to all Muslims, do not mistake what free speech is in France. It is not in any way something which is there to afflict or hurt you. So help me to defend it. First of all, because you once had this freedom in your own countries. Maybe you've forgotten what it was like, but it is the finest thing. Help me to defend it, because it is this that makes it possible for us to live together. Without it, we can only live against one another. I'm not saying that people are perfect or that whoever has hurt you is innocent, but that things can heal, and that we have to understand the reason behind the hurt and try to reduce the misunderstandings. I'm deeply convinced that what is happening now is more than a mere absurdity. I think that by virtue of its values and the fight that it is waging today, that we are waging together, France sees the possibility of constructing a model for the future, one of living together as citizens of the same country, irrespective of our religion.
De construire un modèle pour l'avenir, c'est-à-dire celui de vivre ensemble en tant que citoyens d'un pays, quelles que soient nos religions.
International issues, international relations. Turkey. What is happening with Turkey? This country which is at times an ally, but at other times it seems that you're never on the same wavelength. And there are lots of differences between you, Syria and Libya at the moment. Where are the relations headed?
Beaucoup de cela dépend du président Erdogan.
I believe that a lot of that depends on President Erdogan. For my part, I stick to the principles that I have just outlined. I believe in friendship and respect. I have never insulted a world leader, whoever he was. Never. I am respectful of the president whom the Turks have elected for themselves, and I am side by side with Turkey. As we speak, Turkey has been struck by a terrible seismic tremor, and I should like to convey my condolences to the Turkish people and to say that we immediately offered civil defense assistance to help the population. Turkey is a great nation, a great people, famed for its scholarship, knowledge and openness, one with which we have university, academic and historic links, a great people who has often taken inspiration from us. So what is happening now? I know that Turkey has imperial designs in the region, and I do not think that these imperial designs are a good thing for the stability of the region. I think that what happened in Syria was a surprise for many allies. The US was present on the ground and we were present in the air within the framework of the international coalition. And I must remind you that we fought against Daesh in Syria thanks to the democratic Syrian forces and to the Kurdish militia, male and female militias who were enormously courageous. The war is being won against the territorial caliphate created by Turkey. It invaded Syria, disrespectful of any sovereignty, in order to combat. I regret the Libyan non-observance of the commitments entered into in Berlin. In Berlin, we were all around the table, all of us, committed to observing the embargo on arms and prevent any foreign combatant from fighting on Libyan soil. We have shown that on several occasions, several countries, including Turkey, have violated the embargo. Turkey wasn't the only one, but it did that. I think these two examples demonstrate that Turkey today has a belligerent attitude towards NATO allies. The actions pursued by Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean were profoundly aggressive with regard to both Cyprus and Greece. These two countries are European and we support sovereignty in Europe. I'm reminding you of all of this in order to explain the relations. We have never acted belligerently towards Turkey or its leaders, but I do not think that we can accept the present state of affairs, which is the current strategy of the Turkish president. I consider that as allies and friends we should be frank with one another and be clear about our lines. Now, what is our wish? It is that things should calm down and that the Turkish president should show some respect for France, for the European Union and its values, should not tell lies and should not go in for insults. That would be splendid. I think it's the absolute minimum. And after that, the Turkish president, in line with his country's standing, should put a stop to the unilateral actions which he has conducted against several European countries. That is my view. And what is our ultimate wish in all of this? Clearly, I believe in peace. So I would want us to re-engage our academic, university, cultural and economic relations. But the precondition for such relations is the reviving of friendly feelings and decency and the obtaining of the clarification I referred to. We're not there yet, and during these last weeks we have even slipped back. The President, I must say in relation to your point that it is not a French position, it's a European one. Yesterday we held a European Council where the 27 members were unanimous in supporting France, and yesterday President Charles Michel came out very clearly in support of France against the attacks which it is confronted by today, and he called on Turkey to comply with its duties.
Et il a rappelé d'ailleurs la Turquie à ses devoirs.
Dernière question, Monsieur le Président. Il y a une pierre dans l'édifice civilisationnel dans les deux mondes, la pierre de Rosette.
Last question, Mr. President. There is a stone in the fabric of civilizations between our two worlds. The Rosetta Stone, 1799, discovered by Jean-François Champollion. How can we reinforce this model of intercultural relations in the future?
Mais vous savez,
You know,
non, merci de finir avec justement ces liens de civilisation et de connaissance.
thank you for finishing with this cultural link on civilization and knowledge, how to reinforce through mutual knowledge. As I have said, in the policies that I am pursuing, we intend to invest in higher education and academic and cultural research, to create chairs in French universities on the Maghreb, the Near and Middle East and Muslim civilization. I would also like us to be able to multiply partnerships, which is something that I've done a lot of since becoming president. We all need to get to know our civilizations better. So I think that the time of the Rosetta Stone is appropriate. You are right to quote it, and one could mention many other examples too. But I think that the way forward for us today is that of knowledge, of reason, of scientific, academic and educational cooperation. What feeds fear is a lack of understanding. What feeds hatred is ignorance. And the tyrants of this world maintain that. So the most effective weapon against tyrants, against these extremists, is knowledge and understanding. It is the knowledge of the face of the other person in all its roughness, with all its features. It's the ability to see in the face of the other how different it is from one's own. Our different civilizations, the men and women that we are, this is very important. So I believe that this history should continue, and we shall do that by investing in knowledge, by establishing chairs in the countries of the Near East and Arab countries, both in Muslim and in European civilization, the Enlightenment, French philosophy and culture. And then develop in France university chairs for a better understanding of Muslim civilization, allowing for academic controversy. Because when controversy develops between men and women of science, then the fighting between the ignorance of men and women stops. I have a deep belief in that, in science, mutual respect and knowledge. But let us be quite clear that in times to come, there will be hard battles to wage. It's difficult because today certain men and women have decided on the worst outcome. And in this fight against ignorance, in this fight which is one of hatred, I will need all the men and women of goodwill, whatever their religion.
Monsieur le Président, shukran.
Mr. President, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera, especially because it coincides with the 24th anniversary of the Al Jazeera Media Network.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Shukran.